And we thought it'd be helpful to put together a presentation as we face a new school year, a new grade, new teachers, and maybe even a new school environment this year, as many kids are going back to school for 5 days a week in person for the first time in quite a while, and others will be attending the Digital Education Center. So we want to relieve some of your parent jitters. I know I was always very anxious the week before school started in the first few days of school. So I'm just going to pass along a couple tips that I've gathered from parents, years of experience, teachers, administrators, and others, and provide you with some great tools and some forms and all kinds of great stuff to help you out. So just by way of introduction, then you can advance the slide. My name is Beth Benavides. I am Director of Outreach at the Hussman Institute for Autism, and I'm also a certified parent advocate helping out at the Howard County Autism Society. I've spoken to many of you in the past, and we provide free advocacy support to families around IEP issues and school issues. So anytime you have questions, you can reach out to the Howard County Autism Society, and they will put you in touch with me for some one-to-one support. Okay, so you can go forward, Suzanne. Okay, so my first bit of advice, and I know it always seems easier said than done, is not to panic. There's still time to get yourself organized, to review your child's IEP, to create communication logs for the year, share information, ask questions, and get involved. We have put together, the Howard County Autism Society has put together a wonderful web page of all kinds of really great back to school resources for you. And much of the information that I'm going to be sharing tonight also comes from Reading Rockets. And that's a service of the public television station, WIDA, in Washington, D.C. that received funding from the U.S. Department of Education for special education. So lots of these tips come directly from there. But really, again, what I'm going to present is not, rocket science. It's just really practical advice. And this week is a really important week for you to just get things in order and to start communicating with your teachers. Okay, go ahead, Suzanne.
Wow.
Okay, so before we get into what to communicate and with whom, let's talk about getting organized. We all know in the world of special education that there is a lot of paperwork. And so it's really important that you get organized now so that you can stay organized throughout the school year. And for many of us who love organization, a binder might be perfect for this. And it might have your child's IEP in it, your current IEP, and then it would have sections for communications, it would have sections for progress notes, notes home from school, meeting notices, that kind of thing. But if that is overwhelming and it's going to cause you more stress to create this binder, then simply just create a folder and have a folder that all the documents for your child go into for the school year. And then I also advise in your email to create a separate folder in your inbox that's just for school 2021. And if you have a couple kids, you might put their name on it, but that way you're not sorting through all of your emails looking for correspondence. You'll know exactly where to go in your folders to see anything that has to do with school. The most important point is just to create a system that works for you, and you'll be more likely to use it. Okay. Consider a communication log. This is really great. This is an example that came from understood.org, which is a wonderful parent-friendly website with lots of great resources for families. But this is downloadable from their website. But essentially what it does is this would go into your binder or your folder, and it just keeps track of any communications that you have with the school. So anytime you're making a call or you're sending an email or the teacher calls you with a concern, you're able to track that information. And so that's really, useful to have and to keep right in the front of your binder or your folder. These are just some other, you can go ahead, Suzanne.
Sorry. Nope, sorry.
That's okay. I'm sorry. We're like coordinating our screens here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there we go. And these are just a couple other communication log examples. So again, the idea is to create something that works for you. It could include, the most important things to include obviously are the date, how you were contacted, whether it was a phone call or email, what was discussed, and what the outcome was or what the next steps were. So again, these are all easily found online on Google Images or on understood.org. But I really recommend that families keep these just so that you are not trying to recall in an Iep meeting who said what and when, but this will keep you organized throughout the whole year. Okay. We always advise you to use email for important communications. So it helps you keep track of the conversation and it documents the discussion for further consideration. So again, we always, for any IEP advocacy workshop you've gone to, it always says get things in writing. That's what we advise. So email is one way to do that. It just documents that discussion for IEP meetings or for meetings with principals, whatever you may need. It keeps track of what you discussed, what the outcomes were. And I often advise parents that if they are to have a phone conversation or if they are to talk to a teacher informally, that afterwards they follow up with an email and just rephrase what you heard or what you understood from that conversation. Again, that's just a way for you to get it in writing so that you can keep track of that. Decide what's most important. Oh, hang on.
Sorry.
Decide what is most important to communicate. I know that parents, as a parent myself, it seems everything is equally important. But what happens is that everything is urgent and then nothing becomes urgent. So teachers will say, this is just another communication from Beth. Here we go again. And so you really need to pay attention to how many emails you're sending so that not everything has the same equal weight of urgency. Really save those communications, those emails for the most important communications. Be succinct. You don't need to give a ton of background information. You don't need to tell everything. Get to the point of what it is that, what the issue is and what you're requesting. Again, don't overwhelm teachers with daily emails and don't email at all hours of the day and night. When parents wake up in the middle of the night and email a teacher at 1 o'clock in the morning, it just sends a message to the teachers that you're not really respecting their boundaries of professionalism. They certainly are hopefully not reading emails at 1 o'clock in the morning. Just draft it and send it during the school day hours. And also you can expect teachers to respond during those hours as well. Okay. The next and most important thing for you to do as you prepare for back to school is to review your child's current IEP. We're going to take a look at some sections that in particular that I'd like for you to look at when you pull out your child's IEP. And this will help with the communication that you send to your teachers, what you include in it. So we're going to look at the important dates on your child's IEP, the present levels in the IEP, and the current needs. Specifically, do the goals still fit? And are the accommodations up to date? Keep in mind that the IEP is the cornerstone of your child's educational program. This is individualized, and so of course, this is, the key to correspondence with teachers about your child. So that first section, the very first page of your child's IEP, there's a section with key dates on it. These dates you should know. Again, these are most important and you should know these dates like the back of your hand. The annual review date, you should know when that was, and you should know when the next date is. So you'll see at the top is the annual review date. Then there's a projected annual review date. So that says when we'll meet again for the next annual review. It has the most recent evaluation date. So when your child had that battery of assessments. And as you know, those assessments are due every 3 years. So it projects the next evaluation date. Those are important dates for you to keep track of. Okay, so make sure you know those dates. If the school system is not calling your annual review by the date on here, then they're not in compliance. This also cues you in on when to start preparing for new goals, new conversations about the next year, and so forth. So again, that's on page 1 of your child's IEP. Make sure you pay attention to those dates. And again, this is just a sample. Obviously, the dates will change for your child. Okay, Suzanne? The next section is section 2, and this is the present levels. So I'm going to advise you as you pull out your child's IEP, your child's current IEP, you take a look at what the present levels are. This should include progress notes from all the way up until your child's annual review and or the last IEP meeting. And this should include where your child was, again, at their annual review. If you have progress notes, you're also going to want to look at how they did fourth quarter and how they did during ESY. Were they making progress on their goals? If there was regression, that's obviously something to note. If goals need to be discussed, that's where you're going to gather their information as to where they were and where they are today. So if you see huge gaps, those are certainly things that you're going to want to point out. The next section to look at is accommodations. Okay, I've done presentations on accommodations for families. You all know that I think this is the key to a good IEP, is making sure that our children have their supplementary aids and program modifications that they specifically need. And as you know, these are all instructional supports, program modifications, social behavior supports, and physical environmental supports. Those are all listed in this section 3. That you're going to want to pay attention here to what is listed. Suzanne, you can advance, and whether all agreed accommodations are in place. If the accommodations that are listed on the IEP, and again, all those accommodations are listed because you as an IEP team agreed to them. If the accommodations are not provided, then students are not receiving FAPE. They're not receiving a free and appropriate public education. Okay, so keep in mind, you're not asking for anything, extra here. This isn't a gift from the school system. Accommodations are what your child needs. And so to be able to access and benefit from their education. So take a close look at those accommodations. If you have any questions about what supports are in place for the first week of school, or, if it says post-adult support and you haven't quite heard how your child's going to be supported throughout his school day, that's certainly worth asking. Okay, so take a close look at those accommodations. And I just include these slides here because for parents that are new to IEPs and new to the language of accommodations, these are just some examples. Again, I have a whole presentation on the Howard County Autism Society website specifically about supplementary aids and supports and accommodations and program modifications. Okay, next slide, Susan. And in this presentation, I also provided you a link to the Maryland State Department of Education's Accommodations Policy Manual. So that explains what accommodations are and what accommodations may be requested or may be considered. Certainly, they're individualized. Okay. And then the question, after you have reviewed the present levels and you reviewed your child's goals and the accommodations, the question asked is, does this IEP fit your child's current needs? So if it does not, if revisions are necessary, then you want to request an IEP meeting. And keep in mind that you have a right to request an IEP meeting at any time. You can always meet informally with teachers, but if there are, revisions that are necessary to the IEP and concerns that need to be addressed by the whole team, you're going to want to go ahead and put in a request for an IEP meeting. Okay, so I just want to remind everybody to turn your cameras off because this is being recorded, and your microphones. Okay, so communicating with teachers. This is specifically what to communicate, how, when, and with whom. Okay, so you want to go for it? Okay, so what to communicate? There are lots of different ways that you can do this. I definitely recommend that you send an introductory letter to the teacher. And I'm going to give you a couple ideas of what you might put in that letter. It certainly will vary by parents. It'll vary by what you want to share. But just introducing yourself and your child to the teacher is really helpful to do in advance. Yes, they'll have your child's IEP. Yes, they'll have your parent input from that IEP, but a short letter will go a long way as well. Narrow down the list to maybe the top 5 things. It doesn't have to be a book. It doesn't have to be 10 pages. It doesn't have to be a narrative about your child's whole life. But what are some of the key things, the most important things for that first week of school for a teacher to know about your child? And why are these things essential to know? Why did you choose these 5 things? Why are these the most important things? And what will be the benefit of the teacher knowing them? The other thing is that, keep in mind that whatever disability your child may have, whether it's autism, ADHD, or just insert a disability in there, disability affects children in different ways. And so we want to be specific about how autism affects your child or how ADHD impacts your child's day or your child's learning. So try to be specific about how their disability affects them in the classroom. Note the accommodations that are essential and why. And this is important for all teachers. So this is important not just for your special educator or your case manager, but this is important for the general educators especially, because they may not read the entire IEP. They may not study that IEP in the same way that a special educator would. So if there are accommodations that are essential in the general education classroom, it's okay to go ahead and pull those out and highlight those as most essential. And then I always include, if there's something special going on at home, definitely that could affect your child's learning, you definitely want to communicate that. We know that social and emotional needs affect learning. And so, if there's a family situation going on or an illness or something special having to do with the pandemic, certainly cue your teacher into that. Let them know what may be going on, as that might impact your child when he or she goes to school. From understood.org, they have what's called a 3x3x3 card. And so they suggest communicating your child's strengths, what your child needs help with, and the strategies that work. And so they suggest these 3 areas and putting three things down for each. And there's a form on their website that you can download and fill out. I think that's a really nice form. Suzanne, you want to go ahead? Some others that I thought were really helpful for you to consider. This also is from understood.org. This is kind of a back to school form. And it highlights what your child's experience was with hybrid or distance learning. It essentially just says how it went. It's, again, not belabored. It's pretty succinct here. And then it has a section as well for strengths and challenges, and then recent events. So the same types of things that I mentioned before, but this is a nice form that you can use. And again, that's downloadable from understood.org. And then these are some other forms that I thought were really nice. One is for elementary school children, and one is for middle school. Again, just another way to present the same information to your teachers. But you see, these are all just kind of one sheets that you can send in so that it gives your teacher a snapshot, but again, the most important information. Okay, and then I talked to a couple teachers, and these were just some of the things that really stood out that I hadn't already said. One suggested that you share the little things that you do for them at home. So, for children that need extra assistance, if they need help opening a food item, those are things that are going to be really helpful in the first few days of school for a teacher to know. And then another suggested that if there are prompts or words or strategies that you use at home or social stories, those are all really important for you to share. And every teacher I talked to really encouraged parents to share information. It was not, oh, give us 2 weeks and then we'll get in touch with you. It was really share what you want us to know. So I think teachers are very open to this information, and I encourage you to again, share the most essential things. And then how to communicate. Again, as I recommended before, email is always best. Phone for sensitive conversations, again, perhaps a follow-up email afterwards about what was discussed and any outcomes. you can always request that informal meeting and then an IEP meeting. And, communicating early on is definitely a good idea. And I would ask up front, some teachers would share this, in a parent communication home as to how they prefer to communicate with parents. And they also might share with you what the expectation is on hearing back from them. So many schools and many teachers have policies to respond to parent emails or calls within 24 hours or 48 hours. So knowing what that policy is keeps your expectations realistic too. But it also holds the school accountable. When to communicate, again, communicate early. I would suggest that you touch base by Thursday of this week. I know that's only tomorrow to get all your documents together and get them to the teacher, but Thursday, just so that your case manager or your teachers have an opportunity to get back in touch with you by Friday, so that if you're expecting to hear from them before school starts, you might have that opportunity too. So if you can communicate tomorrow, awesome. If not, then definitely getting things out the door by Thursday would be helpful for teachers to be able to respond. If you have questions or concerns after the first day of school, it's okay to ask them. And, we expect the first week there's going to be bumps. There's going to be bumps for students, for staff, for parents. So we expect that will happen. But don't wait. Don't wait until there's a crisis to communicate. And don't, again, we don't want you stressed out and feeling anxious when there's really no need to be. You can go ahead and open those lines of communication with the teacher. With whom to communicate, I include this slide because, for many students, they have multiple teachers. So they have a general educator, they have a special educator, they may have a different case manager altogether, they may have related service providers. I always advise direct emails. So big group emails to all 10 people that are involved with your child are not going to get the same response as if you directly email each member with what's most important to them and their role. And, I think certainly copying people is important, but a direct email is going to get you a much more direct response. And again, it opens up a communication with each of these people individually, so that no one is assuming that, the case manager will answer that, I don't need to really chime in. You can always copy the case manager so that she's aware of the conversation, she or he is aware of the conversation, and always consider the related service providers as well. So if you feel you need to communicate with the school psychologist, if there's something going on, or a nurse about medications or illness or whatever the case may be, definitely go directly to that person, whatever their role might be. So that's the, kind of what, how, when, and with whom to communicate. But, my other tips are just to be open-minded. We know that things may not have gone last year for a lot of students, and parents are feeling frustrated. They're worried about compensatory services. There are big conversations going on about that, and what makeup services will be provided to their children. Those conversations are going to be happening, of course, but be open-minded about the year ahead of us. It is a new year. You may have new teachers, you may have a new school. So start out fresh as you can, and be open-minded to new strategies. Give that teacher a chance to try new things, and to partner with you. Be open to sharing things with that teacher, and to trying things at home that the teacher might suggest as well. Together, you can come up with plans for your child, and I think that collaboration goes a really long way. And be positive, especially as your kids return to school. So we know that children learn better when they enter school with a positive mindset, when they're focused on something good that's happening, either the day before school starts or the morning school starts. They're excited about the school day. I also know from my own experience as a mom of two children, one with autism, one without, that my children absolutely sense my anxiety. And so when I'm nervous and when I am anxious about the first day of school, they sense that. So whatever you need to do to get yourself more comfortable with the start of school, absolutely do outside of your children. Be careful to what your children are overhearing in your conversations with teachers, and not just your child with special needs. I say this because siblings, so critically important, often feel the stress that you may be having for your child with special needs and internalize it even though it's not about them specifically. So, definitely be mindful of that. Keep your expectations high, of course. Let teachers know that you have high expectations for your child. And the best way to do that is to be open and honest and positive with them. Participate in school meetings and activities. Volunteer if we have opportunities this year for volunteer. I don't know if we will, if we'll have school trips. I don't know if we will, but when there are opportunities, even if your child is in a special education classroom most of the day, there's still lots of opportunities to get involved in that school environment. And teachers and principals respond to that. They want to see you involved. So invest in that school by getting involved in the community, in the school community. It helps your children too. And, just give your child and teachers time to adjust. We know that it's going to take a little bit of time this year, especially. Keep those lines of communications open as everyone settles back in. Tell teachers what is working. Quite often, every email we send is that things aren't going well, this isn't working, this didn't go right, this wasn't provided. When things go well, make sure you share that. And acknowledge the challenge that teachers are facing this year too. So as you all know, as teachers head back to school, not only are they getting to know your learner, they're also having to evaluate very carefully where your learner is after the past year and a couple months of virtual learning. Again, for those compensatory service conversations. And so teachers have an incredible amount on them this year. That's not to say that they should not provide FAPE to your child. They should not teach your child. Absolutely they should. The expectations are high for them too. But, let's acknowledge that they're challenged. Let's give it a little time to settle in. Let's be careful with our tone and expectations. And, again, think of it as a partnership. Help each other along and just give a little bit of time for things to settle in. As I mentioned, there are many back to school resources available. Sarah Somerville, who is our web coordinator, she put together an incredible list of back to school resources. All of the forms that are in this presentation, you'll be able to find there and you can easily download. And there's just lots of links to quick articles that are very helpful with parent tips on back to school. And then other resources for you as you start the year. As I mentioned, I'm here to offer you free advocacy support throughout the school year. So you can contact the Howard County Autism Society at any time if you're in Howard County and have a child with special education needs. The Howard County Public School System's Family Support and Resource Center. Many of you know Ann Schultz. She's a phenomenal resource to families. She can tell you what the school system's expected to do, what resources are available. She can put you in touch with people that you need to be in touch with. So be sure to check out the Family Support Center. And then other websites that are really great for parents, understood.org, as I mentioned, very parent friendly. It's written specifically for parents and just has so many free downloadable things available to you. Rights Law, all about special education law, also written in parent friendly language. And then just a couple other resources, Disability Rights Maryland and Parents Place of Maryland. So that is a real quick presentation for you on what I think are the most important things to get you started and the most important things to communicate. I know that we received a couple questions in advance from parents, but I welcome you to put your questions in the chat box now or to just unmute and ask your question and we'll bring them forward. Several parents asked about IEP review and when that would happen. For many parents, at the end of last school year, some teams may have already scheduled IEP meetings for, say, around October timeframe. The best thing to do is to, let your child start school, give it a couple weeks so that when you come to the IEP table, you have the current year to talk about things that are going on now. You have an idea of the teachers, you have an idea of your child's schedule. So, settling in for those first few weeks of school is a good idea. But if you feel that a 30-day or 60-day review is necessary and one is not scheduled, you can request one. So, that would just be an email to the teacher to say, I'm going to want to have a review. Can we schedule an IEP meeting? You have that right at any time, and you would say, these are the things that I want to discuss. That was one. Others asked, about what to look for in their IEP, what to review, how to make sure that their IEPs are up to date. Hopefully the few little tips that I gave in the presentation will help you as you look at your child's IEP. The most important thing is just become familiar with it. Don't just look at it when it's an IEP meeting. Really sit down with that document. That document is specific to your child. It's the school's contract with you as to what they will provide your child in his or her individualized education program. So it's critically important that just like any other contract, you know what's in it and you know what's being provided, and you can call attention to what's not being provided. So, sit down with the IEP. If you need someone to go through the IEP with you, I'm happy to do that. Parents Place of Maryland offers that service. You schedule an appointment with them, they'll go through it with you. So there's many of us that offer the support to families. There are presentations that I've given and that are on the Howard County Autism Society's website, Special Education Resources website, under presentations. There's lots of presentations that will help you understand the IEP process, the components of the IEP, but yeah, we definitely want you to be familiar with your child's IEP. So anyway, okay, so let's look at the chat and see what some of the questions are that we have there. I have to pull my chat up. Hang tight here. Okay. So the presentation, we're videotaping the presentation, and then we will also put the slides on the Howard County Autism Society's website. Again, all the presentations are there for you that we offer throughout the whole school year. We did lots of presentations last year. A really important presentation for all parents to watch is on compensatory services. Again, every student with an IEP will be contacted about virtual learning, what kind of progress their child made, if parents had concerns during virtual learning, if services weren't provided, what you think your child needs to make up. Every child with an IEP will be evaluated for compensatory education services. Every parent will be contacted. The school will then make an offer of what compensatory services may be necessary, and you have an opportunity then to accept the offer, to call an IEP meeting, to request something different. So please watch that presentation on compensatory education services. And I don't know if perhaps Melissa or Suzanne could put in the chat a link to the Howard County Autism Society's webpage with all of those presentations. That may be helpful. So you should certainly hear from your child's case manager this week. If you have not, it is not too early for you to contact the principal or the instructional team leader for your child's school. So if you go to your child's website, school website, you should be able to look under special education and find out who the instructional team leader is for special education. Email that person and ask specifically who your child's case manager is. They will be assigned by now. Okay, so for someone that has an IEP and a new diagnosis has been determined, absolutely you'll want to call an IEP meeting, and the IEP team, you'll provide those documents from outside of school or wherever that diagnosis came from, and the school will consider it. The school will consider whether this new diagnosis has an educational impact and what that impact is, and whether any new services are necessary, any new accommodations are necessary, and any new goals may be necessary. But it all starts with an IEP team meeting, which you can request, and you should, if you have a new diagnosis. Okay, so accommodations, again, should accommodations be in place from day one? How do we find out whether they are appropriate in place? Okay, so accommodations are in your child's individual education program. That IEP should be implemented on day one when school begins. In reality, we know that there are gaps in staffing. We know that there, maybe materials from one school that haven't transitioned to another school, whatever it may be. So if there are essential accommodations, and I know parents, we're going to say everyone is essential, but if there are ones that are absolutely key to your child's success on day one, those are the type of accommodations that I highly suggest you pull out in your communication to your child's teachers, again, general educators, as well as special educators. So yes, they should be in place from day one. Realistically, not everything may be in place on day one, but let's make sure the most essential ones are. And then don't wait too long to ask if there are other accommodations that you know aren't in place, or if there are ones that you want to check on. You absolutely can talk about that with your teacher. You can have an informal phone conference with the teacher to say, let's go through that list of accommodations and let me know how they're going to be provided and who's going to be providing them. Again, I might not suggest that on day one, but certainly after the first week of school, everybody will have a better idea of how the accommodations are being provided and what's in place. And so you certainly can have that conversation, and I would recommend that. Is the projected evaluation date auto-populated? How does it account for whether a child is able to turn 8? So again, by law, every year they project every 3 years, a child is due for an evaluation. The disability code, as we know, when a child is 8, a child is turning 9, a child can't carry the developmental disability code any longer. It has to be changed to another educational disability code. And so that conversation will happen. And if an entire reevaluation may not be necessary for that. So if that date, if you know that your child, the schools absolutely will contact you before that time to talk about the disability code. And again, an entire battery of evaluations may not be necessary. That the evaluations before may have shown that, and a parent may have still decided to carry the DD code, even though the child qualified under autism. But these are good questions. And again, these are questions that you absolutely should ask your case manager. And if your case manager can't answer them, email me and I'll get in touch with the people in the school system that can. So, that's a great question about the projected, about, when a child turns and how that meeting is scheduled. I'm thinking teachers are keeping track of that, but it's a good question. So I'll definitely follow up on that. But I suggest you ask that question directly of your instructional team leader at your school. And if they can't answer that, then that's a question for the Department of Special Education. So that's a great question for your resource teacher assigned to your school. And, for your parents out there that may not know this, every school has a resource teacher assigned to it, and every school has an instructional facilitator assigned to it. These two individuals work in the Department of Special Education at central office, and they're there to support you and your school, to provide additional resources, to come in when there is disagreement between parents and teachers. So, you can ask questions of your resource teacher and your instructional facilitator as well. Yes, so for an accommodation for a child that needs breaks, routine breaks, you absolutely should discuss that with the IEP team. You're going to want to have that documented, that your child needs breaks. This is probably something, if she's going into 11th grade, it's, I'm sure, something that the teams may have identified before, or that they may have been providing and it just was never added to the IEP. But if that is an accommodation that your child needs, and many children do need breaks, they need either, like just breaks to take a walk, sensory movement breaks. They may just need a break to kind of decompress and have 5 minutes to not be, pressed with instruction. whatever it may be, it's just clearly stating why that's essential for your child, and what the purpose of that accommodation is, what the impact of that accommodation would be, and what it would, what the impact would be if she didn't have that accommodation. So that certainly you can add accommodations. The IEP can be changed or modified at any time. So if there's something new that you feel needs to be added, you can speak to your case manager about that. If the IEP team is in agreement, then that's something that can absolutely be added at any time. Okay, so compensatory education services. Let me take a quick drink here. Pardon me. It's a big topic. Okay, so compensatory education services. As we know, compensatory education services are something that have been around for a long time for children who did not receive something from the school that they should have. That was agreed to in the IEP. So if a school did not provide something, if they failed to provide something the IEP guaranteed, then, for whatever reason, and in this case, it was that schools were closed because of a pandemic. Still, if the school is not able to provide it, then children may be due compensatory education services if they regressed or if they did not make the expected progress they should have. And so what will happen is, again, these are makeup services. So a school might determine that your child missed speech and language services that were called for in their IEP. They weren't able to have as many sessions, or they weren't able to benefit from OT virtually. And so we need to make that up in the school in the next school year or the next couple school years. Your child is still due those services. And so essentially what the school system is going to do is look at all those areas of regression or progress that was not made as expected and determine what they need to do to help make up for that. And so it's going to be a compensatory education service offer that is sent home to families, for families to consider, for families to go back and say, no, I think my child needs more. Parents can give input as to what they think their child missed, what they think their child may need, how they think their child was impacted by virtual learning or even by hybrid learning. Again, every parent will be given that opportunity to give input. And I just want to explain the process. You don't need to call your case manager and ask about this or when you're going to be considered for it. This will happen on a rotating basis throughout the year, where each child in the next couple of months, the first batch will go out in October. It's like 25% of kids in October, and then a couple months later, another 25% of kids, and so forth. But every child with an IEP will be evaluated to determine whether they are due compensatory education services. So again, I encourage you to definitely take a look at the PowerPoint that's on the Howard County Autism Society's website. It explains all of it. I co-present it with Patricia Gunshore, who is the coordinator of compliance, and she is her office is the one that's overseeing all of these compensatory education offers. Okay, and then what if your child is already 8 at the time of the initial IEP? If a child's already 8 at the time of the initial IEP, you may want to go ahead and just determine what the disability is rather than having to come back to the table before your child turns 9. Okay, any other questions? I hope some of that was helpful. Again, I encourage you, I'm gonna ask Suzanne if you can just advance the slide. It gives our contact information for families to be able to get in touch with me with the Autism Society for anything that you may need. There's lots of support available to families from the Autism Society in addition to education support. We have social events. We have all kinds of parent workshops, parent support groups. We can connect you to resources in the community. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. And I just encourage families, if you're not a member, to please become a member. and join so many other families that are getting support and supporting each other. And then the final slide is just my personal contact information at the Hussman Institute for Autism as well. You can get me at either place. Yeah, hopefully. Oh, I'm sorry if I had the phone number incorrect on that slide for the Autism Society. I will correct it before we post the slide. But thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to hang here for another 10 minutes just because I said I would be available for an hour. So if anybody has questions, I invite you to either chat them or just go ahead and turn your camera on and say hello to me so I'm not the only person here. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have up till 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for joining us.